So I have a lot of like rejection, or even some company, they don't send out the rejection to the candidate. So the first challenge was like I presenting to this hiring manager with my student projects. There's no story about collaborating with PM or engineer. It's really hard for me to answer these behavior questions because the behavior question is always around collaboration or communication with the cross-functional team. So I feel like it's really hard for me to prepare for an answer.
Hi folks, I'm with MINJUN today, and I am excited to have MINJUN with us. MINJUN, where are you joining us from?
Seattle.
Seattle. So would you like to start off by giving an introduction of yourself?
Yeah, sounds good. So my name is MINJUN, and I'm currently a UX designer at Amazon, working on the global Prime experience team. So my team is helping Prime member discover different benefits and stay connected with our Prime membership. And before Amazon, I was a product designer at Wayfair, working on their warehousing team, designing the tool for our warehouse associate and their supervisor to drive more efficiency and help them stay safe when they are doing their job in our warehouse. I got my master's degree in human computer interaction design at University of Washington, Seattle, where I learned this UX design and research methodology when I was at UW. And after graduation, I landed my job. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And just a quick walk down memory lane, where was your first UX job?
So my first UX job was in Boston, which is a very small like startup company. It's College One. Basically, we are building the two-side marketplace for the high school students who are looking for the guidance when applying for the college. And the other side of the player is the college student who already go through this process and they want to become a mentor so they can just get actual money like outside the school. So I was a designer on the a consultant platform where I designing tool for these college students so they can basically log their time and work after they are having done sessions with a student or they help them revise the assets. Yeah, so this is my first job out of my school.
Oh, okay, nice. So talking about your first job, what were some of the challenges that you experienced during that time? Let's start off with talking about like the challenges you've experienced before applying to your job.
Yeah.
Or sorry,
There's
while you're applying to your job.
I think there's a lot of challenge. Let me think about, because when I was in the master programs, I didn't expect the job market to be such competitive, and I didn't have any like internship or any professional experience working as a UX designer or UX interns in the company before. So I have my student portfolio when I was applying for my first job. So I have a lot of like rejection, or even some company, they don't send out the rejection to the candidate. So the first challenge was like I presenting to this hiring manager with my student projects. There's no story about collaborating with PM or engineer. And the second one is coming from my school experience. It's really hard for me to answer these behavior questions because the behavior question is always around collaboration or communication with the cross-functional team and how do you solve the conflict or disagreements. So I feel like it's really hard for me. Even I know about exactly the question they want to ask, but it's so hard for me to prepare for an answer because I don't have the ingredient how I can cook the meal. This is how I feel about the behavior question. English is not my first language, and how I could present and talk like candid other like people, the high manager or any senior designer within an hour to present my works, because I know about the storytelling is so important during the job hunting, but I didn't have such confidence to just talk something in English for an hours. especially like how I can just showcase my strengths or my superpower through this story. I just didn't have any idea, and I didn't have such like confident, and I don't feel really comfortable to talk with someone in English. The last piece is about also is coming from my background, because we are an international student. If we are looking for a job in the US or in Canada, we have some sort of the limitation, because we have the visa sponsorship, this kind of requirement. So, and most of the company, they don't sponsor an international student. This company will be just automatically cut off in the first step.
Yeah, and that's a lot of hurdles to go through while you're trying to navigate your first job, trying to find your first job, applying to it, and now also English being a barrier because that wasn't your first language.
Yeah.
So let's start with talking about some of the applications. You mentioned that one of the struggles was coming from school. You haven't done a lot of those collaborations. You haven't worked with engineers. You haven't worked with PMs. How did you explain that, or how did you actually answer those questions during interviews and show that although I haven't done this, I still have the skills to be able to do this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically, there are one thing I did when I was looking for my first job, because I find the paid internship positions in Seattle. I took like the internship even though I didn't really like the product, but I feel like it would be a great chance for me to talk with the product partner, which was the CEO at that startup, and the engineering. So basically, I can just keep documenting the story I had when I was collaborating with these people in this startup company. And the second part is I was trying to think about what kind of collaboration story I had when I was doing this school project, because some of my school project was the group work, and I did have such collaboration with other designer or the researchers on this kind of school project. So I'm trying to think about anything I can highlight from my school project. So basically I use the example from my unpaid internship works, as well as my school project, which is the group project. Yeah, but it was still really hard, because when I was doing this internship, I already start looking for a job, but I only have like maybe like 1 or 2 months experience, and I didn't have so much example. And every time I feel like, especially during the one-on-one with different folks, PM and engineer doing the interview, I was so anxious about everything they asked, because I didn't have so much experience how I can share more example or share more story with you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I can totally resonate, because I did a boot camp. So after going through a 3-month course, like even that felt very limiting, because going into applying for jobs, I know that I don't have the experience that other designers would have. And it was really hard to explain that. And I think similar to you, one of the things I did was also seek out either like internships or like volunteer projects. I did a lot of work for free just to have the opportunity to get exposed to like working with different people and like cross collaborating. How did you actually answer that question when they would have asked you, okay, what was your experience like working with developers? Like, how did you solve this problem? How did you approach that answer during interviews?
First of all, I 100% agree with you approach, where you did a lot of volunteering works and this kind of unpaid like internship or design opportunity, because this is how I suggest most of my mentee trying to do, because the job market is so competitive. It's really hard to get into, especially the full-time position without such experience. And another thing I can recommend the student or the young designer to do is, if they can find some like hackathon opportunity where they can collaborate with the PM and engineer, it could be also be a great like story or example to share with the hiring manager. Going back to your questions, so there are 3 strategies. One is just trying to think about that everything happening when you are doing this like volunteering or unpaid job. Just trying every moment can be a story. This is how I feel because I only have this moment. The second one is basically I will search the media article about like how do you collaborate with like engineer or this cross-functional team. So basically in this kind of article, usually people will share some like top highlight or bullet point about what is the best practice for collaboration. So I might just write down this best practice from this article because I think one of the behavior questions strategy is when you talk about the example using the star methods, in the end of these examples, always talk about your learning or reflections on it. So I can just integrate what I learned from this media article into my personal learning. So I can basically have a great learning, a couple of great
Yeah.
key takeaway to talk about. And the third one was I reach out to my like mentor or the alumni from my school who already become a designer in the industry for 2 or 3 years. So basically I asked their experience, like how do you collaborate with this cross-functional team in their real world job, so they can just talk about like their experience with me. So basically I can have a really basic understanding of the real world, like how people collaborate with each other. And definitely the last thing is just searching this kind of resource outside media, maybe on the YouTube or just different platform, because there are a lot of the talk or YouTube video already mentioning about that their experience working with cultural functional teams. So trying to just leverage all these online resource, alumni, mentor resource, as well as your personal experience to craft the story.
I think that's such a great point, and I really like that you touched on that because we have access to so many resources and you won't run out of information. We have a lot of it. So I think it's just seeking that out when you're not really sure how it works, and also connecting to that point about showing that you're learning and you're reflecting, because every process you go through is going to be different. It's not going to be perfect. So I really like that you shared that as another way to learn about how you can collaborate with cross-functional teams.
Yeah, because one of the things I learned with this kind of junior design interview was actually this hiring manager, they are looking for someone have such potential to growth into more mid-level and senior position, and they are looking for someone who are really just curious about that this problem space and who have such willingness to just learn and keep growing on their own. So I feel like in this way is also showing you're willing to learn this kind of great attitudes from the interview.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's chat a little bit about the second part of your challenge, which was the language barrier. And I know that can be a very frightening thing because that's part of having that confidence when you're in an interview. So how did you get over that hurdle?
That's a great question. A couple of things I did. One is I'm trying to apply as many positions as possible because I feel like the best practice was to go to this real job interview, which will push myself to speak something in English with the recruiter, with the hiring manager. So when I going back to my first job hunting journey, I did apply tons of the resumes online. Sometimes I have 20 plus job interview each week. So during this 20 phone call or video call each week, you naturally become more comfortable to speak something in English. And the second one is during that time, I did have some like design mentor or my friend who are the industrial designer. So I reach out to them. So I practice this kind of, especially the portfolio presentation. This is something you can prepare in advance. So I practice the portfolio presentation with them to get the feedback. And also we can refine the structure and refine the story together. And the tips I have is during that time, I did hire like someone, like I did hire the English teachers who are really good at the presentations. So basically, she will help me on everything about like English pronunciations, as well as that transition between the slide, as well. She shares some of the strategy on the storytelling with me as well. So I did have such like weekly like English session with this English teacher every week, which was also a huge help for me when I was looking for my first job. And last thing is always about like practice. All this year I did for the portfolio presentation job interview is just looking for the opportunity to speak something in English and keep practicing it. And so especially like I am the person like when I was get into these real world job interview sessions, I become more and more like comfortable, and I have such like pressures coming from my visa, which is a good thing for me because I can't wait until my English become like perfect and then I find a job. I have to just keep doing it and then improving it until I land my job.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. I think this just really speaks to the effort and the work that you put in, because it's one thing to actually experience this challenge, and then the second part is actually doing something about it. And you hired someone to help you. You did all this practice. We need to highlight and triple underline that. Practice plays such an important role. And I think whether English being your first language or not, especially with interviews, just to help build your confidence, which what you were mentioning, and also the comfort that you have. So then that way things come more fluently and almost flawlessly in a way, and natural as well. So you don't feel stumped when you're actually answering these interview questions. So I think that's amazing that you've taken these efforts to actually do something about it. And congrats on getting through that hurdle, because I know that's a big one for a lot of folks.
Yes, just so challenging. I can still like feel such what that was a struggling time I have been like going through. Yeah, but I just learned and grow up a lot during such process.
Yeah, I'm sure that was like a great learning experience. And let's talk about application, because I know you've done a lot of that. Let's chat about some of the applications that you've done and the things that you've learned from it. So what kind of things did you try? Like maybe with your resume or your portfolio, and what did you iterate on?
Yeah, so let's talk about the resume first. So in my first resumes, I actually just mess it up with a lot of different like title, like UX design or like graphic design intern, visual design, because I didn't know about what they are expect to see on the UX design resume. So it turned out to be that when I was applying for this position with my first resume, I didn't hear anything back because what they are looking for was all these UX design related keywords on your resume. How I learned about it, I feel like this is something I learned when I was talking to one of my designer friend or just someone else. So I start to know important the keyword on your resume. So from there, I start to just pulling up a couple of the job positions from this company website and trying to dig into what kind of keyword they are using on their job description, because all these keyword will become the keyword basically you should use on your resume, but you can just rephrase it a little bit to, for example, a lot of job description have such sentence like work with blah blah people, so you can basically rephrase it into collaborate with someone and partner with someone blah blah, because that is the keyword they are looking for. And trying to using the UX design or UX design interns as your job title on your resume, and don't incorporate other like different title like researcher or UX writer or visual designer, because that will make the recruiter feel really confused about like which position you are looking for. So I feel like this too is my strategy and what I made And I have a huge improvement after I made such change. And the second part is about the portfolio. Portfolio is also about the two parts. One is the online portfolio. The second one is the portfolio presentations. And for the online portfolio, I did preparing for a long time before I graduated from the school, because that was my first UX design portfolio and I didn't know how I can start. So I spent lots of time by doing searching on like other people's portfolio to see what kind of structure, like layout, and what kind of the storytelling skill they are using in their case study. And then I start to just putting all these things together, which takes a lot of time. Then for my online portfolio, I was using the Squarespace to build it because I know that is not necessary for you to build up a like portfolio using your like front end programming skill set. Using a Wix or Squarespace is totally fine for the designer portfolio. So after I searching all these different online portfolio, I basically have the idea on the structure of the case study. First of all, you should have an overview, which we will basically talk about like your roles, your responsibilities, the team structure and timelines, as well as the goal or results in the very beginning. And then after this overview session, going down, we will have a session for the project background, which we will highlight what is the user problems, what is the business problems, and did you have any success metric? And then going down will be in the design process with like key iterations you made through this process and talk about the rationale, like, or talk about the pros and cons of each option or each direction. And then if you have some like user testings, definitely include the user testing results into this iteration process. So after this design process, we will have the last session is about the outcome, reflection, and the next step. So basically here, this is the structure I learned from my own research, and I continue to just use these kind of structures to make sure that my portfolio is talk about something at the right point and I don't miss up anything else on my portfolio. Yeah. Right. And another thing is when I was doing my first job hunting process, I started to realize that the portfolio presentation is actually very critical during your interview process, because in the beginning, I didn't know we should prepare portfolio presentation to showcase the projects until I was informed by one of the recruiter, and I realized that, oh yeah, we should prepare the portfolio presentation. And this is also the common mistake I thought a lot of current student or the young designer, they didn't know how important the portfolio presentation it is during the interview process. So this is what I always share with my friend and my mentee is when you start doing your online portfolio, trying to make sure that you can wrap up really quickly so you can have more energy and effort to build up your portfolio presentation. Because once you get into the interview process, portfolio presentation is way more important than the online portfolio itself.
Yeah, this is a very great summary, some great points. So I just wanted to quickly highlight like some of the things that you mentioned. So starting off with your resume, you want to keep things focused to the job that you're applying and thinking about using those keywords. So taking a look at the job description and understanding it and bringing those elements into your resume. And two, which is getting into the portfolio. And maybe we could talk about that in a little bit more detail in just a second. You mentioned a lot of things there about the overall structure of things, talking about your roles, your responsibilities, talking about the problem, getting into the success metrics. And yeah, so I think before speaking a little bit more, you talked a lot about the portfolio presentation as well. I think this is a great one. And it's interesting how you also took your portfolio presentation separate from your online portfolio. With your portfolio presentation, I can tell you how like I've done it, and you can jump in as well. Like how I usually do my portfolio presentation is separate from my online portfolio. and
Yeah.
I actually set it up as a deck. And that's
Mm-hmm.
how that's just easier for me to tell my story. I know some people still use their
Yeah.
online portfolio,
Mm-hmm.
but what do
Mm-hmm.
you use when you're presenting your portfolio?
Yeah, I was using the Keynote slide to present because
Yeah.
some of the company they do just tell the candidate that we will expect you to have the presentation slide
Hmm.
during the portfolio presentation session. So some of the recruiter they did highlight we should have the portfolio slide. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, let's actually talk about a portfolio piece so that way it's easier to tie in a lot of those points that you mentioned in. So I'm going to share my portfolio that is in dire need of an update. So this is probably going to help me. I haven't updated my portfolio in a while, so I'm going to get some slight embarrassment sharing this. All right, so we're looking at my portfolio right now, and this is actually a school project. And I did this when I was taking a course at General Assembly. So this was pretty much my final project that I had done. And this is what I actually used when I was applying to my first jobs because I didn't have a lot of other projects to post. So this was like an app to help dancers with their rehearsals. And just a quick overlay of like how I've done things. I've actually separated it into pitch and process. And the reason I did this was because I know recruiters go through things and scan everything quickly. So going through this right now, it's just quick to get an overview of the visuals and how it could work. And you can click in as well for an interactive prototype. And the process pretty much goes through a lot of the details, which I'm assuming like the hiring manager would be interested in or other designers. I'm assuming like MINJUN, you've probably taken a look at this, but I'm just like scrolling through it for anyone that's watching. I pretty much, I would say, done like all the things that most folks would do when you finish a project at school and you're trying to include like all these things that you can do. So included all the wireframes, the ideation, the UI, and if I were to scroll down further here, I talked about like the outcome learnings and future considerations. So yeah, this is just like a quick overview. So maybe we could talk about some of the likes and dislikes. No feelings will be hurt, so feel free to break this down.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing I want to mention, this is all about my personal perspective as a mentor and candidate. It's not from the hiring manager perspective because I'm not a hiring manager at all. First of all, I like the way where you have two columns. On the left hand, you basically talk about your names or like where you come from and which you specialize. Because when the hiring manager they open, it's really important to just having your names on your portfolio somewhere so they can at least remember that I'm looking at your portfolios. But I think here what you can think about in that if you want to improve your portfolio is make it more unique about you personal yourself as a designer. So for instance, I specialize in UX design and visual design. It is still too broad for the designer to talk about who they are as a designer. So I will recommend you to think about or superpowers and what is your design principle or what you are interested in next as a designer, because that will be an important part to connect with your current experience and your future opportunity you are looking for in this 1 or 2 sentence description. For example, like if you are like working on the Spotify and you can say something about like specialize in like the streaming like consumer like facing service, something like that. So as a hiring manager, they will expect something to see like you have done something for the streaming and B2C. Or if you talk about something that I'm extremely good at mobile prototyping, so they will expect to see you have different like prototype sharing out during the process. So try to think about what is your strength, superpower, what is the industry, the specific design, the product domain you have been working at, and trying to connect it with the future opportunity you are looking for next.
Yeah, I think this is great feedback and important as well, because you can highlight the things that would connect you to that job. So
Yeah,
focusing your portfolio in that sense. And
yeah,
yeah, I was taking some notes as you were talking as well for improvements. I wanted to quickly touch on the process because I feel like this is probably like a major struggle as to, do I have to include all these things that I've done? Because there's a lot of work that goes behind like these portfolio pieces. So you try to put everything in your portfolio. So what would some of your advice be around, should I include like all these things, talking about apart from the role, like getting into the details of like user research, etc.?
Yeah. So definitely you don't have to include all these things on the process, especially for that you role here. Maybe like trying to think about if you can scrolling up a little bit about that you role, you can actually make it a little bit concise by using the bullet point. So you can basically using the bullet point to pull out that user research and interaction design, visual design, branding, and basically like all these kind of competitive analysis, all the thing about the user research. You don't have to just mention it in on detail using the bullet point. You just need to mention the high level responsibility you have under this role. And then if you scroll down to the user research, I think there's a lot of like common mistake I see from the junior designer is they talk about too many things about the user research. For example, like you mentioned, you have a couple of like high level questions you ask during the research. And some students also have a list of the spreadsheet talk about the competitive analysis and with all this detailed information. Like you are looking for UX design or product design job, you are not looking for the research job. So trying to make this part extremely concise by having what is the one sentence like people problem you want to address, what is the one sentence problem statement you have for this case study. And then if you have some like detail, you can mention about a couple of the pain points you discover from the research. So you can say something like, I did the competitive analysis and contextual inquiry and find interview with the target user. And here are the 3 pain points I discovered from this research. And you can just basically using the bullet point again to list out the key pain point you discover. So you don't have to just explain every research methods or showing up more like questions you have during the research. Because what I experienced from my past experience, if the hiring manager they interested in your research process, definitely they will ask some follow-up questions after you have done this portfolio presentation. So maybe they will ask you like, how did you run the research to understand this problem space? So they will ask this question in detail. So you don't have to mention it early on. So this is really important for us to think about in which moment we need to dive deep into the detail, showing some moment, showing some story, and in which moment we need to just high level, just walk through what we have. So it's also the technique we need to just learn and keep practice.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a great point, especially what you mentioned about if they want to know more about a specific process, you'd likely be asked that question. I think it's just showing what you mentioned around being concise and the high level things that you've actually done and not having to bring out all these details. So that makes sense. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second because I actually wanted to chat about, I feel like maybe a controversial topic is cover letter. Do we do the cover letter or not?
Yeah, that's a great questions. So I personally I don't write any cover letter before, so I don't have any my personal strategy or tips I can share about the cover letter.
Yeah, I remember we did talk about this a little bit and we both had different opinions on it. And for me, I've been doing like cover letters for a long time. I used to be a biochemist, so even when I was applying for jobs then, I was using my cover letter. And even when I was applying for design jobs, I was using my cover letter. Unfortunately, even myself, I don't think I have an answer, but the reason I do it is because I find that resumes sometimes can be concise, and cover letters can be an opportunity to show a little bit more about yourself and maybe even get into things that you're interested in. So that's primarily what I used my cover letter for. To me, it feels like maybe it did help and it was a nice package with the resume, but I know that's like something that we actually don't know. Maybe a recruiter knows or a hiring manager might know.
Yeah, I feel like that's a great question. We can ask for hiring manager, like how many times they do read people's cover letter, because I know my friends, they always mention that the hiring manager, they only spend 2 or 3 minutes to looking at your portfolio, online portfolio. So I'm just wondering how much time they will spend on reading the cover letter. Yeah. And the other thing I don't know about, like the cover letter that you mentioned is trying to just make it more specifically about like how your past or current experience and how you can connect it all to all this experience into this like opportunity at this company. I feel like I don't have the cover letter, but actually when I am doing my interview process, I do have such like story, like when I introduce myself, like, or they ask the question like how you get into the design. Basically, what I verbally talk about will be something on the cover letter. This is how I feel about what you just mentioned about your experience with the cover letter.
Yes, that's a great point. And I feel like this makes me want to bring on a recruiter to one of these chats, because I feel like there's a lot of questions that we actually might not have a clear answer to. So I think I liked what you said about bringing in that story into your interviews. And I guess your portfolio can be a replacement for that as well, because that's a place where you can also talk about yourself. So maybe that takes away the need for cover letters. And so I wanted to end off with asking you about if there's a piece of advice that you'd want folks to take away from.
One piece of advice, I think the top thing on my mind is be persistent and be patient, because there's so many like challenge or obstacle like coming from your life and your works, especially when you are looking for your first job. It is definitely not an easy task. So trying to just know about like what you can improve and how you can leverage all these different resources. It's like how you can better improve all these things we talk about, like how you can improve your answer for a behavior question, how you can make it better for your portfolio presentation and resumes. So trying to just keep working on all these things, that is important for your job interview journeys. And every time if you have the rejection, don't feel so stressed or don't feel so upset, because that is normal. I always tell my friends, I don't see any designer, even they are just a top designer, I would say they must have the rejection early on when they are looking for the job. Yeah, everyone have the rejection. So don't be like stressed out or frustrating by getting the rejection from this company, and just keep moving forward. Because once you land your first job, if you want to grow, no one will prevent you from like leveling up into other like positions, because our career is our own responsibility. Yeah, and just keep moving forward. That is the most important part. Yeah.
Thank you. No, that was great. So literally just practice, iterate, keep trying, keep moving. Wise words. Thank you so much, MINJUN. I think there were a lot of juicy things that we spoke about in just this conversation. And I'm excited for people to hear it, and hopefully this helps them. So thanks again so much for your time.